over the years, my practice has been like an upside down pyramid. You know, I started taking things off and cutting down and doing less and less because I didn't really enjoy doing a lot of different things to where I'm at now, which is, you know, I wake up every morning happy to come to work because I sue debt collectors and mortgage companies and help people, you know, get rid of their debt.
Right. Now, in the opening, I mentioned that your motto, and that really struck me. I was like, okay, now I really like your motto of helping
good people through bad times.
Right. And that's kind of, I think, where we're right now in pretty much a recession. And it's kind of falling into what your motto is about helping good people.
You know, everyone that comes in to see me about bankruptcy sits there and apologizes for coming in, and I tell them, look, it's not your fault. You know, they say, well, we want to pay our bills, and everybody does. Nobody runs out and runs up credit cards and says, look, help me beat this credit card company out of all this money. Nobody does that. Everybody that comes to see me is very reluctant to come to begin with. And in most cases, they should have come to see me a year before they actually come in, but they've waited and they've put it off and they've robbed their retirement accounts to try to pay their bills.
Just kind of struggled in the process of trying to get their mindset on this is what I'm going to ultimately have to do.
And society has put a lot of negative connotations to bankruptcy and a lot of shame, but people don't understand that bankruptcy is right out of the Old Testament.
And when we talked about that, you mentioned that earlier.
In Deuteronomy, the Lord told the Hebrews every 7 years to forgive your debts and free your slaves, and that's where we get chapter 7 bankruptcy from. So there's nothing shameful about it. In the New Testament, the Lord's Prayer says, forgive us our debts as we forgive those. Because in the Bible, and of course, bankruptcy is in the Constitution also, because our founding fathers realized that the most important thing is preservation of the family unit, preserving the family. Debts owed to a debt collector or some creditor are secondary to preserving the individual in the family. And that's what it's in the Bible for also, is to preserve the family unit.
So it's not like what everybody think they should just be fearful of it. It can resolve some issues and really kind of get them pretty much back on the right track.
Absolutely. And bankruptcy is one of the most powerful consumer protection laws that we have. It's set up to protect your family and to protect your property.
Now, if a person is watching and they hear us talking about bankruptcy, how would you define bankruptcy? We're going to talk about the different chapters a little later on, but just to give that person just a little insight as to what bankruptcy is, what would you tell them?
It's just a way of restructuring your debt, eliminating some debt altogether and restructuring the debt for the things that you want to keep. You know, the law allows you to keep a certain amount of property because they don't want you to start all over again from a hole in the ground and dig your way back up. So if the government didn't want you to do bankruptcy, they wouldn't have passed laws to allow you to do it. And they could take those laws away from us at any point, but they're still there. And every creditor that you list in bankruptcy gets a tax write-off for the money that you discharge, so they don't lose anything, despite what they'll tell you on the news.
I don't think people know that.
They don't.
I don't think they know that happens.
These companies get a tax write-off. They don't lose a penny, despite what you hear on the news and everything. And the credit card companies want everyone to believe that we're all out there just running up bills, trying to beat them out of money, even though they're charging us 36% interest at the same time.
They're kind of leaving that little part out.
But every one of my clients that files a Chapter 7 gets flooded through the mail with new credit cards. The credit card companies cannot stand the fact that you don't have a card and you're not paying 36% interest.
And then when you mention that, I know, and I have talked to individuals in the past that it used to be college students. When you became a freshman in college, you just got tons of credit card offers. But you know, now they have stepped back and they're really, I call it attacking seniors that are in high school, and that's kind of like writing a check and giving a young individual a check for $100,000 and said, don't spend it. What do? They go right out and they buy everything from pizza to whatever they can charge.
Because at that age, you know, you're learning. You make a lot of mistakes, and credit is one of those mistakes, giving college students credit cards. And they still do that at colleges. They set up tables, they give them T-shirts, Frisbees, and have them fill out applications. And it's not a good thing for a college student. Because
and they, like I said, most of them, when they are coming into college, you know, they're in need some when they come there. So that credit card, like I say, is filling in for the things that that they need and then things that they don't need as well.
That's why student loans are such a huge problem now, is because it's easy to get that money. Kids aren't using it to pay for school. They're using it to live on and party on, and those things nowadays with private loans, they're worse than credit cards once you get in default. They're horrible for students now.
But would you tell a person that is a college student to maybe have one, no more than 2 credit cards? Because in this day and time, you almost need, if you don't have a checking account where you have a debit card, you almost need at least 1 or maybe 2 credit cards until you can kind of discipline yourself. But I don't know if a young person can do that.
I told my kids if they got a credit card or a tattoo, I was cutting them off. Nothing against tattoos, it's just at that age you don't know what you want and what you need and stuff like that. So, but I didn't want them getting credit cards either because they didn't have jobs.
Yeah, and then later on it's almost like it's too late.
They'll end up ruining their credit in college, with those cards, or they get such a huge bill and they don't have any way to pay it. Even if they got a little part-time job, they're using all that money to live on. They don't have money to be making payments, especially at 36% interest.
Really? Well, we're going to get ready and go on break. Before I start talking about, we're going to talk about the different types of bankruptcy when we come back. But we're going to take a break and we're going to be back in just a few.
For more information about tonight's guest and services, Attorney Frank Coxwell, call 601-948-1600 or visit the website at www.coxwelllaw.com or www.mississippibankruptcyhelp.com or email frankc@coxwelllaw.com.
We're back and you're watching On Location TV with my guest today, Attorney Frank Coxwell. I'm going to call you the bankruptcy king, lawyer. We're finding out some information that the public needs to know about. Of course, we can't talk about everything about bankruptcy, but just enough to make that person think about, even if it's a young person or if it's an older person that may be at that point considering it. And then also we want to talk about a class that you're going to be teaching a little later on. Now, before we went on break, we were getting ready to talk about the different types of bankruptcy. So if you could just share the different types of bankruptcy that is available.
Okay. The 2 types of bankruptcy that most people would be eligible for would be a Chapter 7 and a Chapter 13. Chapter 7, the court wipes out all the debts you want to get rid of. You keep whatever you want to keep, house, car, whatever, and continue to pay the regular payments on it. Nothing changes on that, but everything else is gone.
It's like a liquidation?
Right. It's called liquidation. And that's mainly for people who are just trying to get rid of a lot of medical bills and credit cards and can handle the house or cars. You can let a car go and not have to pay for it too. So, but it's your decision what to keep and what to let go. Nobody makes that decision for you. You make that yourself. The Chapter 13 is the only one that'll save the house. If you're behind in your house or behind on some car notes, then you have to do a Chapter 13 where we'll spread the notes out over a longer period of time to cut the notes down and to free up some money so that you can keep the property you need to keep and pay for it at a lower rate. And we can still get rid of credit cards and medical bills in a Chapter 13, but you pay money to the court every month and they pay your bills for you. Usually it's taken out of your paycheck if you work for an employer.
So it's kind of like a wage earner.
Your job will probably code it as a garnishment because they don't know what else to call it. But it's a separate, it's a wage withholding order. And so your car note, usually we can cut that in half. The house notes, we force the mortgage company to start taking the house notes back again because a lot of times they'll quit taking them. And then what you're behind on the house, we spread out over a longer period of time. So you're paying the house note plus a little extra each month to catch up the back notes.
So with a Chapter 7, how long does that stay on a person's credit?
Both bankruptcies can stay on your credit reports up to 10 years. But that doesn't stop you from getting credit. People think that it does. One of my clients called me and said, my 10 years is up, can I get credit? And I said, who told you to wait 10 years?
Well, they waited a long time.
She sure did. And I said, I didn't know. I said, you should have called me, but I have a paper that I give my clients that'll tell them what to do to get their credit straightened back out. And in a Chapter 7, Usually if they'll follow my instructions, they can have their credit back in the 700s within a year.
Oh, okay.
It's a lot different than it used to be.
Okay.
Bankruptcy's not what people think of when their parents talked about bankruptcy,
right.
and it's a lot different.
It was kind of like a hush thing then, of course.
It was extremely shameful to people back then.
People wanted to pay their bills, and I think people still want to pay their bills, but they're so caught up with the job market the way that it is now and different things that may be occurring that they almost don't have a choice.
Well, and medical expenses, illnesses
right.
bring a lot of people down. Because if you can't work, you've got those medical bills, plus you have no money coming in from the job, so it's kind of like you're hit twice.
Right.
And that's what bankruptcy was set up for, is to help people out of those situations.
So what do you think are some of the questions or that a person should be thinking about in order to help them to determine if this is what they should consider doing?
Well, first of all, if you're struggling or having any trouble paying your bills, see a bankruptcy lawyer sooner rather than later. Most of them don't charge for a consultation, or if you do have to pay, it's money well spent just to get the information to see what's available out there and to decide what's best for you.
Okay.
Too many people wait too long, and they've drained their retirement accounts, they've drained their savings, stolen their kids' college money, gotten too deep and pay credit cards rather than pay the house note. Mm-hmm. That's wrong thinking. We don't do that. The important thing is to protect the house. But the credit card companies are the ones that hound you the most.
Right.
So we pay the people that hound us the most.
Right.
And the mortgage company doesn't call that often, so we let them slide when we really should be paying that and letting the other people go.
Credit card.
Right. But to see a bankruptcy lawyer early, and get the information. You don't have to sign up, you don't have to file, but just get the information to decide what's best for you.
Now, if a person, just say if I'm coming to you, what should I bring to you during that consultation? What do I need to have prepared for you to look at when I arrive?
We want the two most recent tax returns. We want 6 months of pay stubs for husband and wife, if you're married, and then all your debts. Okay. We don't necessarily care about your living expenses and all, but credit cards, house note, car note.
Just a listing of who you owe.
Or you can bring the statements.
And how much you owe to that individual.
I'm used to people dragging garbage bags into my office full of envelopes that never been opened, because they're just so overwhelmed and they just don't even want to look at them, because they've reached that point.
So when you think about bankruptcy, and I think you mentioned it, people fear that this will ruin my credit forever.
And they fear that everybody's going to find out about it. It is public record, but unless you know where to go hunting for it, or unless you tell somebody, most people are never going to know.
And who cares? Because they may see it and never see it again.
Well, you think back 20 years ago, being divorced was a big deal, especially if you were a female. You were called a divorcee, and that was a big deal. And bankruptcy was a big deal back then. But now, like you said, who cares? Nobody cares.
Now, when we talk about bankruptcy, there are certain things that can be discharged and there's certain things that cannot be discharged. What are some of those things that cannot be discharged in a bankruptcy?
Child support, alimony cannot be discharged. Taxes can be under certain circumstances if they're over 3 years old, and that's 3 years from the date you filed them. If they're not dischargeable, at least in a 13 you can pay them back, and it stops the interest and the penalties, which is something that can be huge with the IRS. They put a lot of penalties and interest on there. Criminal fines, student loans cannot be discharged.
Yeah, because I think some people are confused about that as well when they think that they can discharge student loans is the first thing that pops in a person's mind. That I'm going to be able to write off all that $100,000 debt of student loans. Not going to happen. Unfortunately,
no. There are some hardship provisions, but it's hard to qualify for that. Now, if you're on disability for 3 years, they'll automatically wipe out your student loans. If you've been on disability, but that's usually a long way down the road for most people. But the student loans and criminal fines, we can't wipe those out.